There's a massive change coming to European e-commerce that most businesses haven't clocked yet. Over 90% of those parcels will now be affected. This is huge. When the customer receives it, they're going to be having to pay these duties on arrival, which is not a very good customer experience. Prices are going to go up, customer experience is going to go down. That's going to squeeze margins, but there's a unique angle that many businesses still don't know about. Northern Ireland, the dual market access is really going to come into play now and have a huge benefit to so many businesses. There's a massive change coming to European e-commerce that most businesses haven't clocked yet. There are over 5 billion parcels that move into the EU every year at the moment, and over 90% of those parcels will now be affected by this change. This isn't niche. This is huge. It's the vast majority of e-commerce movements within Europe, and it's something we all need to pay attention to. In this episode, we're going to be talking about what de minimis is, what it means for your business, these changes and how you can actually navigate these new waters, and what it means for actually doing cross-border trade in a smart way in 2026. So there's a term used in business called de minimis, and it's actually a Latin word for, it means about minimal things. And where they have used this in logistics is to say, well, okay, in Europe, there's €150 de minimis allowance for products moving in to Europe. What that means in practice is there's no duties charged on those parcels under €150. Famously, the United States of America had an $800 de minimis allowance, which was huge for then exporting into the States from across the world. And it was a massive marketplace for many until August of 2025, when that famously was removed by the administration in the United States. The EU is now following suit, and they are removing their de minimis allowance of €150. And that's what we're here to talk about today and what that means. So de minimis, the old way of doing things, would have enabled parcels to move into Europe without any duties or taxes for anybody sending parcels into the EU from outside of the EU. And there was that €150 allowance for that. And what that enabled was massive, large-scale cross-border trade for low-value items. The explosion of the likes of Shein and other marketplaces in the Far East importing into the EU. And that had its pros and cons. And what the EU are now doing is tripling down on that, because they have found the marketplace is saturated with what they call fast fashion or low quality, low value goods. And the EU businesses themselves have complained about this, and they want to actually have more space for themselves to do business within their own jurisdictions. So it's becoming a much more competitive landscape for EU businesses, and it's meaning that cross-border trade is now becoming more difficult to navigate, but those who do it right will win. From the 1st of July 2026, what's changing is that there will be duties applied for every parcel moving into the EU from outside the EU from €0. So with any value at all, there will be duties applied. How they're going to charge this at scale? They're going to be charging €3 per commodity code. So that means if you're sending a t-shirt and a pair of shoes, for example, they're two different commodities, and you'll be charged €3 a piece, so €6. And then you'll be charged a per parcel fee as well for clearing it. And that's likely to be in and around €2. So all of a sudden, that parcel movement, which just had freight on it before, now will have freight plus €8 clearance fees and duties. So that's a major barrier for the likes of the fast fashion sellers in the Far East and different places like that. But it's also huge for businesses based in GB, right next door, who were sending into the EU, obviously not part of the EU anymore, will now be hit with these tariffs. That's going to squeeze margins for them if they take the hit on that. Or it's going to mean when the customer receives it, they're going to be having to pay these duties on arrival, which is not a very good customer experience, especially if it's not been well informed. And in addition to that, there's going to be delays. There are over 5 billion parcels that move into the EU every year from outside the EU, and every single one of them now is going to go through this customs process. So there's going to be delays in that shipping and restriction that wasn't there before. So let's take a scenario, something quite close to home. GB, if you're a GB based business and you have been shipping into Europe, your goods are valued under €150 and you've been benefiting from that de minimis allowance whereby there's been no duties applied. Well, now there will be, and your customers will either have to pay that whenever it gets delivered, or you're going to have to pay that on their behalf, which will obviously squeeze your margins. So it's going to make you less competitive. EU customers are going to be shopping a lot closer to home now because of this change. They're going to be supporting local a lot more, especially with that being the reason behind this change. So it's really important for GB businesses to understand that from the 1st of July, it's going to be a lot more competitive and there's going to be that barrier of entry into the EU. So we put ourselves in the position of the customer based in the EU. They're buying something from, say, a London fashion retailer. They go to buy that online and import that to themselves. They're now going to have that restriction. There's going to be duties to pay on import. They're going to get an email or phone call from the courier saying, you must now pay 10, 15, 20 euro on that import, which they didn't have to before. It will also mean delays where it could have been 2, 3, 4 day shipping into their country. That could be increased by 100, 200% because of delays at customs and also the response time from the customer, the individual actually paying those duties or charges. So it's not going to be a positive customer experience. And I definitely believe GB businesses are going to see a downturn on their exports if they don't act on this. So you flip it back now to the GB based business and you want to respond to that customer experience that might be coming down the road, and you decide to actually add in those costs yourself. You actually decide to take on that burden and pay for it on your customer's behalf. What that's going to do for you is tighten your margins, reduce your bottom line, or you're going to have to increase your retail value and your cost to your customer, meaning you're more expensive, less competitive. And we've seen that in the past with the USA removing their de minimis allowance of $800. A lot of businesses decided to take on that burden, but you have seen that their prices have had to go up because of this, and export trade has gone down as a result because they're less competitive. So there's two angles to look at there from the customer's point of view, the business's point of view, and there has to be some kind of meeting point in terms of what you're going to do. Either the customer's going to pay it, you're going to pay it, price is going to go up, customer experience is going to go down. There's a balance to be struck there. This is imminent. As I say, the changes are coming into place on the 1st of July, and countries have already started to introduce charges in preparation for this change. So obviously these changes are around EU import parcels. So the obvious way to get around that is have the parcels in the EU. So if you are a business and you have product based in, say for example, Great Britain and also the EU for those two marketplaces, some large businesses and medium businesses have taken that angle post-Brexit to mitigate risk, and it's worked quite well. That means your EU-based product still moves inside the European Union without these charges. So that's good news. But if you're a business and you're based in GB, then, well, as we've just mentioned, there's going to be those duties applied to the movements on the parcels under €150. So what you have to look at is, well, if you actually place stock in Europe now, then that mitigates that risk. It means that those intra-EU parcels won't be charged, won't be affected by this change. So then you have to start looking at that, if that's something you're going to do. It's really pressing now, whereas before it wasn't necessarily pressing. GB businesses could have just had one stock holding and supplied Europe and not been affected by Brexit. Now there's duties on everything. So we've talked about GB businesses shipping into Europe. What's that going to mean now post 1st of July? People who've had stock holding in Europe and no changes will come into effect. But there's a unique angle that many businesses still don't know about, and that's Northern Ireland. And that's the dual market access that we talk about is really going to come into play now and have a huge benefit to so many businesses, which is really exciting. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom as well as the EU single market for goods. And what that means in principle is that you can move stock into Northern Ireland and ship it into Great Britain. England, Scotland, Wales. You can ship it into Ireland or the rest of the EU member states, and there'll be no duties on those movements. And that is true today. It is true post the 1st of July 2026, which is humongous. We've had many clients move into our facilities over the past number of years because of the current Brexit arrangements and the benefits they can avail of, which I've just talked about. But it's going to become even more prevalent and even more pressing to make that decision now this year, because these changes are coming, and the people who actually make the right decision now will get ahead of the competition. People are making these changes now in advance, in preparation, and EU customers are going to be looking for those businesses and those products that are duty free. And you can do that too if you stock your goods in Northern Ireland. You don't have to have GB stock and NI stock, or GB stock and EU stock in the mainland. You can move everything into Northern Ireland and still have the one stock inventory pool, which reduces the cash flow strain on your business. Or if you are a slightly larger business or more cash rich and you decide you want to have some domestic goods in GB closer to your customer, you can still do that, have Northern Ireland as well, and it's close by, and you can access the whole of Europe from here and move goods back and forward to GB as and when you wish. So it's a huge strategic benefit available. If Northern Ireland wasn't there, businesses would be in a much more difficult situation, because you would be looking at splitting stock entirely, or just having to force your customer to pay duties or take the hit yourself. That's not the case if you consider Northern Ireland and that dual market access benefit that the country brings. So what does this mean for your customer if you were to warehouse stock in Northern Ireland? Well, it means on your website you can actually detail explicitly no duties on any EU movements. Massive selling point. And it means when your customer actually purchases, they get it delivered, they get a shipping notification with a tracking number, and it's delivered as if somebody in Germany was buying something from Germany. It's as simple as that when you're moving it from Northern Ireland. Here in Northern Ireland, when we ship to the EU, there is a shipping label printed. There's not a commercial invoice, there's no requirement for one, and it's as easy as shipping something to Belfast as it is Berlin. So it's hugely beneficial to the business, but also the consumer. It's removing all friction points and just making life that bit simpler. Business before Brexit comes to mind, whenever there was just so much ease when it comes to cross-border trade. Well, we have that benefit right now to give back to the customer that experience that they once had. So if you're a business in GB and you're thinking, I might consider Northern Ireland as a place to hold my inventory, how do I do that? Well, moving it from GB to NI is quite simple. You arrange the movement of goods, and there's something called an ENS number triggered, which allows that movement to take place. And within 30 days of the movement taking place, via something called a trader support service, we upload a file, or you upload a file to them declaring the contents and the value. Now, moving them from GB to NI, there's a term called at risk or not at risk. And at risk means at risk of re-entering the EU single market, which is how we'd be declaring those goods, because they are at risk of going into the European Union. So that means duty would apply if the goods are country of origin outside of UK. But those duties actually don't need to be paid out of your bank account. There is another de minimis allowance, which is €300,000 per business over 3 tax years. And what that means in principle is if you owe £10,000 in duties moving a container load of clothing from GB to Northern Ireland, on paper, it's owed on paper, your de minimis allowance that your business has, that €300,000 over the 3 tax years, is deducted from that. And that's automatically deducted via an integration between the TSS and gov.uk HMRC. So that all takes place in the background, and it is really smooth. As you say, you have 30 days after the movement to declare that to the Trader Support Service, and the goods are already here, and you can access the European Union. When you're taking it a step further, so you've already made that movement from GB to Northern Ireland, you're then looking down to, okay, when you're importing then ongoing from, say, your Chinese supplier, if that's where your goods are manufactured, you import them directly to Northern Ireland, and you still actually have to declare them at risk. a different reason, but obviously it's coming direct to Northern Ireland. And there's usually an additional 1% on the duty. So if your clothing was 11% into London, it'll be 12% into Belfast. And that is that additional amount you will have to pay to import it from Northern Ireland. So it's a very small amount. Over £100,000 of goods cost price from China, you're spending an extra £1,000, but that enables the access to the whole of GB and the whole of the European Union from there on in. And that's something your freight forwarder can do. It's very, very easy to declare that, and nothing changes from that point of view. So in theory and in practice, it is very, very simple. And we're here to actually walk clients through that process, assist, make connections with freight forwarders. We can also fulfill that paperwork from the GB to NI movement point of view. And things can happen really, really swiftly without any friction. Something to keep in mind with the de minimis allowance of the €300,000 over 3 tax years is that that's based on the cost price of the goods and the actual duty applicable on that. So if it is a huge import at £10,000, that comes off the allowance. It's not retail value, it's literally the duty applicable on the value of those goods moving in. We work with over 64 active clients right now, and not one of them have ever hit that de minimis allowance. And some of these are very large businesses moving hundreds, thousands of parcels a week out of our facility and importing from GB to NI on a regular basis. Never hit that allowance once. So it's not something to be scared of. It's not something to be worried about hitting that limit and then you're going to have to be paying all this money to the government moving it from GB to NI. It's a really, really good framework and it's here for the foreseeable future. And again, we can assist with actually moving the goods from outside of GB into NI, and the best way possible to get your goods here to maximize the opportunity available. So the 1st of July is coming. These changes are coming into effect from that date. There's going to be winners and losers in this situation. The losers are going to sit tight, do nothing, and when it comes to 1st of July, they're going to be paying duties and taxes, or the customers are. They're going to see a reduction in their export sales to the EU, and it's going to be really frustrating for both them and their business and their customers. The winners are going to be people who are proactive and act now and get in place solutions to enable cross-border trade without any duties and enable that really positive customer experience. And that is Northern Ireland. That is an EU-based fulfilment centre. And that's something you can talk to us about or others, and we'll be so glad to walk you through that process. So what to do now? Well, it's start to plan. And it's actually reviewing your fulfillment landscape, where your goods currently reside, where they could reside, and then understanding your actual landed cost when you move your goods into those locations from the marketplaces or the suppliers that supply your business. And it's then time to make a decision as to what you're going to do with this change that is coming around the corner. Do you want to scale and grow your business, or do you want to sit tight and let it retract? Do you want to have fulfillment centres based in these jurisdictions and split your stock, or do you want to consolidate everything and go to one 3PL in the likes of Northern Ireland to benefit from that dual market access? This isn't just a new rule, it's actually a change in landscape entirely, and I hope that has become clear in this episode. We want to make businesses aware of these changes. The series is called Freedom to Grow, and we exist as a company to give businesses the freedom to grow, and it's why we formed this podcast series, because we're so passionate about that, giving people the knowledge, the insights, so they can take that and grow wherever they are, whatever they are doing. So please do share this with anyone who you know may find it helpful or useful in these days. These changes are coming, they're around the corner, and it's really going to make an impact on these customers in Europe and also the businesses from outside of Europe. And we need to look at together how we best respond to ensure that we don't lose out on those customers, and that your brands and your businesses and your teams continue to flourish where they are.